and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. My name is Frederik from Deurs. I'm the CEO of Green Innovation Group. We are a management consultancy dedicated to the decarbonization of the healthcare sector. So that is all we do. We take on projects that we can see has a direct path to helping decarbonize the healthcare sector. That's all we do. And in today's episode, we actually have Simon, who is the producer of the show, interview me about what it is we actually do in this consultancy. And that was a really interesting experience for me because it gave me a chance to pause and reflect on what it is we're doing and how we're positioning ourselves, how I communicate what it is we're doing and why. So I learned a lot from the conversation. I hope that you will too, and you'll find it exciting. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Simon. Hello, Simon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You've actually always been here.
Hiding in the shadows, so to speak.
Not for us in here, but for all of our viewers. Simon is our producer, and we thought it could be fun now. He's been recording more than 40 episodes of the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. Mm-hmm. And we thought it would be fun to have your take on it and let you kind of deploy all of the insights that you have gained from being a fly on the wall in all of those conversations, and see what comes out of it if we actually give you the microphone and let you run an interview. So that's the setup, the premises of today's show. So thanks a lot for coming here, and thanks for recording all of those episodes.
Yeah, and that's also why I'm for those of them watching this episode, I'm pushing all the buttons while we're speaking.
It looks very techy.
It is. But yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. And it's been mind-blowing for me to be in the shadows and to listen to all of the things going on within sustainability and all of the work that you're doing. So in a lot of these episodes, we've been talking about the heroes and people out there making a real difference. But I feel that we need to dive in more into what is it that you guys do. And we're going to dive into a specific example, not naming any names, of course, but still understanding the process of work that you're doing. But maybe if we start, how do you go about, or how does a company go about looking into, okay, we have a problem, or we need to do something more within the sustainable area? What is the first contact you have with the company?
That's a really good question. It changes a lot from one situation to the next. So it's quite context dependent because it's something that's always in motion inside an organization. So we usually, one of the things we do when we get in touch with a company and they reach out to us and say, we have this problem, we would like for you to help us design a solution for it. We kind of put them on a stage in their maturity journey, where we define, okay, these are very mature, they already have a sustainability strategy, they already have an implementation strategy, they already have a roadmap to get there, and everyone in the organization has awareness about the strategy, and everyone in the organization has competencies to execute it. That would be sort of the pinnacle of maturity. And then typically they're not there. And then we need to figure out how are the operating models in the company, how they deployed, where are the gaps, the execution gaps, where there is a goal, there is a strategy, resources might be allocated, staff might have some competencies, but they still struggle with making it into the everyday or onboarding their colleagues or whatever may be the problem. So usually on day zero, when they contact us, we do sort of a quick and dirty maturity assessment of where are we at on the journey, what kind of budgets do we have available, what kind of decision makers do we have access to, what are they willing to do, and which timelines are we looking at, how many people do we need to engage, what kind of access can we get to the organization. So that'll be one of the first things we do. And then we typically take a vantage point in some kind of a materiality assessment. Sometimes the client will have done the materiality assessment themselves and identified we really need to fix packaging all of our factories need to become part of the circular economy, or all of our factories need to stop incinerating waste and do something else with the waste, or have a more sustainable approach to electricity purchases, or whatever it may be. And then the assignment is a little bit more concrete. One assignment we just completed recently was with a support organization in a global pharma company. And this organization is a support function that supports all of the production areas in environmental issues. And they had the problem of staying up to date with the current state of affairs on sustainability matters. So they were already sustainability experts.
So why do they contact you? Because if they are already experts, what kind of knowledge do they reach out for you guys to give them?
So their problem is that they needed to stay up to date on the current state of affairs. So the sustainability field is one that's developing quite fast. And that means that it does take up quite a lot of time to stay up to date on what is the state of affairs 2023. If you were updated the last time 2020 or 2018, a lot of things have changed. So, for instance, I've been saying for 5 years that the next big topic is going to be biodiversity. Everyone's going to talk about it and take it into consideration. And that has happened now, 2023. Everyone's talking about biodiversity. Nobody knows what to do because people have started to have some idea about what to do with CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. But biodiversity is still a black box. It's like a completely open playing field.
But talking about biodiversity, and remember episode we did with Alexander, could you just give me a short definition of what is biodiversity?
Yeah, for sure. So biodiversity was actually one of the topics that we had in scope first for this assignment, and then we removed it from the scope because it was not relevant enough for this team to know about it. But biodiversity can be seen in two ways. It can be the diversity of life measured in number of species, or in the thrival of the species, or in the mass of the species and the diversity in that mass. So there's a number of different ways to look at it, but I think the most pressing way to consider it is that we're facing a mass extinction. We're actually sort of in the middle of the process of a mass extinction, where a lot of known species are just going extinct. So that would be sort of a reduction of the number of known species living on this planet. And that's termed the biodiversity crisis because, of course, the diversity is drastically diminishing when the number of known species is dropping at the alarming rates that it is. So what was interesting in this case was that we were tasked with helping this department become a learning organization. And then we conducted anthropological research. We have a couple of anthropologists in the team. I'm a health anthropologist by training myself. We did field work in the department. We went to their offices and worked at the offices for a couple of days, doing what we call participant observation. So
you're more or less a fly on the wall. You're there watching, learning how they work.
You take part in the meetings, you listen to the conversations on the floor, these kind of things. You observe how they inhabit the room. And we could just conclude that it already was a learning organization.
And they didn't know it?
They didn't
realize it?
They didn't call it that. They didn't realize it because there was a discrepancy between whenever they were facing a task, they would have something they didn't know that they would have to learn. But they didn't call it learning. It was more like, I do some research in order to fix this task. So it doesn't qualify as learning because I'm not getting a diploma. So it was kind of also taking this sort of discrepancy head on and saying that you are knowledge workers. You're constantly acquiring new knowledge. You just don't file it as such. You're doing knowledge exchange with your co-workers when you're talking about biodegradable plastics and what to do with that, or when you're talking about circular economy in your forums. So you're already a learning organization. Your team members are highly qualified in addressing these agendas. So that was the first thing we started working on, was kind of like, how can we change this self-understanding, the self-image of the employees, and then
and better understanding the work that they actually do. or the process of the work that they do.
Yeah, and figuring out sort of how can we make this habitual, because there's been many attempts to try and build a knowledge bank or a database of sources and resources that we use, and they always sort of get all dusty, and then they stop being relevant because the maintenance of such a database is just crazy. So we proposed instead to look at the organization as a body of knowledge with a lot of nodes or a lot of living human computers in it that constantly acquire new knowledge and always stay up to date. Sometimes they may have acquired faulty knowledge, but we also have such a high quality group of people in there that they are already source critical. So we must assume that what an employer in this organization takes as face value as knowledge, we can use that as knowledge until it's proven wrong in a way. So we kind of went from this data computer library fetishization of a database that's maintained into sort of a more organic approach, saying that, well, if we look at the humans as libraries, you can really run the most insane expert Google search just by calling Anya, who's an expert on waste, and asking her who is the expert on waste in our organization that knows the most about cardboard waste sorting. And then Anya would tell you need to talk to Klaus. It's always a Klaus. and then Klaus would be the one that you would talk to, and then you would pick the brain of Klaus. And in just 2 hours, you have become a full-fledged expert on what you need to know about cardboard waste. And you would actually, in consulting, we often talk about if the client knew what the client knows, there would be no need for us. But if we equip the client with the tool to actually know what the client knows by deploying this, we call it the snowballing methodology. So you kind of imagine a snowball that's rolling down a mountain and gets bigger and bigger. And that's kind of the effect, that you talk to one subject matter expert and have them lead you on to the next person you need to talk to on a specific area. That way you can acquire deep expertise, knowledge on any given subject that is relevant.
How did you go about mapping all of this information? Because you need to know that I need to call Anya, and Anya needs to know that she needs to refer you to Klaus.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is that you can never map this knowledge in its entirety. No. So we needed to recognize that and agree with the client that this is never going to happen, and it's not the point, because we don't know what we need to know. So we defined a scope of 3 different topics that were in scope, and then we mapped the entire department's level of expertise down to the individual level, put that up on the wall, so you know that, okay, Birka is a level 4 on waste. Okay, so she knows a lot about waste on a regulatory level, so she's the one I'm going to talk to waste about. I myself am on level 1 or level 2, so people are going to go to me for introductory knowledge if they need to spar on that level, but don't need sort of deep, heavy-duty expertise. So they would be able to orient themselves on their own department at first, and then this organization has a number of subject matter experts that are defined to be sort of, you could say, gatekeepers of knowledge for the whole global organization on different topics, and they are mapped in there as well. So you would know, okay, this is one that just know all, be all on this topic. So that's probably a good place to start, but they may not know the nitty-gritty of the subsegments of the topic.
But it also makes a possibility for you as an employee who needs to gain new information to go to a low level, perhaps, if they just need, as you said, a short introduction. And then they don't have to disturb the expert in this field of knowledge, because they might have other things to do if you just need to understand basic stuff.
Yeah.
But how did you, is this like a graphic map, or how did you...
The best way to answer that is that what is the organization capable of doing now that they weren't capable of doing before? So first of all, they have these visual knowledge maps that can hang on the wall in the department, where they can see, okay, this is the subject of water. Here are all the resources and how they know what they claim to know, and These are inspirational. These are regulatory knowledge. These are expert reports, and these are the staff that I can contact at various levels. So that was one key product that kind of helped them say, if we need to do anything on waste or water, then we'll just go consult the map, and then we can go do. But I think what's more important is that the department got a language to talk about the acquisition of knowledge internally that they are using actively now. They also got a language and solid KPIs and a methodology for kind of putting and activating learning as an activity inside the department and doing knowledge shared in a more organized, systematic way. So they become less dependent on the Klaus that knows a lot about waste and can actually sort of grow their own Klaus on different topics.
And how do they do that? Is that in individual teams or individual persons? How do you?
Yeah, it becomes part of the employee development plan.
Okay.
So the direct manager now knows how to guide that person on that journey towards expertise.
Okay. But do they then need to know it all or need to know who to contact?
It will be case by case. Some of them will need to know all, and some of them will need to know who to contact. It changes a little bit from one function to the next. So it's also a really complex department that does a lot of things at once for a lot of other divisions and units. So it was a really fun, exciting assignment where we really were presented with a really interesting problem. And we also see that it has a tremendous potential for impact after having done it, because they're just very clearly able to do things in a different way, and they do it with empowerment. So there's also this sense that they were already habitual learners, but now they recognize themselves from being that.
And starting from day zero, they contact you. We have a problem. We need your help. Until the last day the project is ended. How long time does a project like this take?
This one was, I think, 4 months or something like that. But it depends a lot on how mature the client is in the purchasing decision. So in this case, they had a need, and they had a budget, and they had a time frame. So, if you have those three things, then it's probably possible to do something like that. Then our job becomes scoping, how are we solving that problem with that budget, within that time frame, with the access to people that you can provide. So this one was relatively smooth, but oftentimes we have those conversations and dialogues with clients and they can actually last years. So another project that we finished recently was one where we've had the conversation going for 2 years before it materialized into a concrete project.
And is that because they need to mature, they need to learn the language, they need to understand this world, or why? Why does it take such a long time?
Mostly because it has taken a while for sustainability projects to get budgets that allows for hiring someone like us, where it has been under prioritized for many years, and that has starting to change. That getting access to the means has become easier, and also for us to build a convincing case that this is the business case, this is what you get, this is the value at stake, this is the money you're leaving on the table if you don't hire us to help you. Yeah. So we always need to be able to help our clients with a solid business case, so they can see that they get their money's worth, and that it would be foolish not to hire Green Innovation Group to help them out. That's kind of where we need to be, because if we cannot make that case, then there's no reason to believe that the decarbonization is happening in the other end. So I think it has a lot to do with the maturity of the client and of the problem as well. And then it also has to do with sort of connecting the dots, and quite often the businesses are not set up in such a way that there's always a clear connection between decarbonization, cost cutting, and deploying of sustainable strategies and sustainable measures.
Okay. So that was one project that you've been working on for a long time, or is that a long time?
That's
4 months?
Quite common.
Okay. And is that the only thing you do with X amount of people for that period, or do you have multiple projects working at one time?
We typically have a number of projects ongoing. We try to keep a consultant to have a maximum of 2 projects at the same time, because then the transition cost starts getting too high if you're doing too many things at once. Of course, I'm the one who does the most things at once in the company. As the CEO, you kind of have to have an overview of everything that's going on at once. But I also allow for myself to have some deep work assignments where I allocate full days, preferably 1 or 2 days in a row, to put in solid consulting project work in a project. But most of the time I do 1 hour here, 2 hours there, 3 hours there.
Like most consultants actually do.
Yeah, unless they're good at focusing their time. But I think the switching cost of switching tasks is quite high. So we try for our consultants to have no more than 2 assignments going on at once. And of course, sometimes that fails. But
of course,
but that's the general setup. So as an organization, it changes a little bit. We have some projects that last 2.5 years. So we typically have a number of projects ongoing. So that changes a little bit with the seasons as well. There's also some peak seasons in consulting where the fiscal years are ending and the clients can see, okay, we have a lot of budget left and we would really like to
spend some money.
And before New Year, you're like, okay, we're doing a lot of different stuff now, and that just comes down to some of the seasonality that's also in it.
Looking back on all of the projects that you did, what is the one that you remember the most, that make the most impact on you personally?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a few that come to mind, but one that is very close to my heart right now is developing an operating model for the sustainable transformation of a factory mass of a global pharma company, where we helped 7 different factories across 4 different continents develop a model that allows for them to tie the sustainability strategy of the corporate organization into the transformation strategy of their production sites. So just really allowing for them to say, okay, to become a world leader on sustainability in water in a production facility, this is what we need to do. This is the level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know we're in level 2 and we have checked all the boxes in level 1, and then the worker on the floor would also know it doesn't make sense to work on this item in level 2 because we're really striving to get to level 5, where we would actually be able to leapfrog level 2 and level 3 by integrating these other technologies or these other methods. That project was really exciting because we always work with a lot of stakeholder engagement, so we make sure the transformations won't fail. And here there's just so much excitement from the staff, and hopefully we will get to work with the procurement team on integrating LTA methodologies, so life cycle assessments in all of their procurement decisions, and tie that into their financial models, meaning that every time they buy something, they will know what is the sustainability impact from it on the product lifetime, and not just what is the unit cost. So allowing for them to become much more sustainable buyers in the market, and therefore reduce their scope 3. So that's something that's close to heart, and also something I'm working on right now. So it's kind of close to what I'm doing. Another really exciting project is about helping a hospital system and a medtech company co-create a demonstration project that shows how might we reduce the number of surgical procedures per patient in a given area, and therefore reduce not just the dollar cost, but also increase the patient experience and vastly reduce the CO2 footprint from the surgeries by doing just 1 surgery instead of 3, which is possible with this device that looks a lot like the device that they usually would buy 3 of. Now they can just buy 1 and do the surgical procedure in 1 setting instead of 3 different ones. So it becomes a dramatically improved experience for the patient, and the clinicians will also have a more focused effort, and the success rate based on the academic evidence that we have with this procedure is also a lot higher. So it's just one of those win-win-win-win-win cases where somehow there's a lot of barriers for those to be deployed. It would just make a lot of sense if this became sort of the new standard of care. But it isn't. But if it could become the new standard of care, we could dramatically reduce the CO2 emissions associated to it, improve the patient experience, and we would also be able to handle more patients in the healthcare system with this method. So that's another example of something that's really exciting, to be sort of the facilitator of those dialogues between the private sector and the public sector. That's also quite exciting.
If we look at the examples that you just gave us, you need to know something about medtech. You need to know something about the rules in hospitals and health department, and production facilities, anthropology. Well, of course, you know all about anthropology, but you yourself as a company also need to have a lot of knowledge. And how do you make sure that you have the relevant knowledge and can handle all of these tasks?
Well, we need to be dead cats, right? So we need to have a lot of curiosity.
Yeah.
And we also have a superpower in Green Innovation Group, that we're not afraid to look stupid and ask questions that might sound dumb. And that just allows for us to get a lot of introductory knowledge on topics that we're not familiar with really fast.
Yeah.
So really not being afraid of asking silly questions that may appear silly. That just allows for that body of knowledge to open much faster to you. Rather than pretending that you know stuff you don't know. Just be quite honest about what you know and what is the limitations of your knowledge. And usually we also try and be upfront about what we know and don't know, and introduce problems with the sentence like, the way I understand the problem is like this. And then the client sort of can help you fill the gaps much faster.
Yeah.
So for instance, in an American context, I talked to a benefits company yesterday that is not an insurance company. And in Danish, you would kind of be an insurance company. Also, if you were giving benefits or delivering benefits. And that was an example of something where I was not aware of the concrete financial difference between insurance and benefits in an American context. But I was very blunt about not knowing it, and then they explained it to me.
I know nothing about that. So I would also ask those kind of stupid questions.
And you know, if you put yourself in those situations a couple of times, 8 hours a day, for 8 years, then you end up acquiring a lot of knowledge. And that's actually why we do this podcast, because I cannot deploy that knowledge in my work efficiently. You know, I need to share this knowledge with the world, so it can come out and can inspire others to do work, because I can only be one place at once.
Yeah.
So that's also why we decided to do the Sustainable Healthcare podcast, was that we could see this knowledge is applicable for so many organizations and people that aren't or cannot be our clients for various reasons. But we owe it to the world to actually, you know, just let that knowledge be out there and make it available for free.
Yeah. And in that way, also maturing customers in the future to understand what is the problem and how can you actually help them solve this problem. Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, quite frankly, I think it's probably a foolish investment from a marketing perspective, but we consider it more philanthropy, that we do this also to mature the industry, because we would not be able to deliver services to everyone who's listening to this podcast, because we're in a certain spot in the market, but maybe we are inspiring someone to go and talk to some of our colleagues in different companies about getting help to solve their problems, or about maybe getting an LCA analysis conducted. We could never do the LCA analysis for them, but we could point them in the right direction, for instance. And that's also some of the tasks that we're being given. Is, you know, someone would tell us, well, we know we need to get an LCA, but we don't know how to make that purchasing decision. So can you help us in this procurement situation?
Yeah.
And that would be another area where we would be quite capable of pointing them in the right direction really fast and really efficiently, and make sure that they avoid the first couple of mistakes that they could have made.
And also by making this podcast, you still have this dead cat curiosity, because we've also been diving into fields where you guys didn't know all of it, or some of the information were new to you guys, also for me. So this is also a way for you and Joachim and the rest of the team to stay curious.
Yeah, definitely, and for us to educate ourselves, it definitely is. And sometimes I'm also thinking that a lot of the meetings that I have during a day could actually be great podcast episodes, because I'm basically interviewing the clients to understand the industry, to understand their clinical area, or to understand the drug or the patients that they're catering to.
Well, thank you so much for coming with these examples and making us a bit wiser about how it is that you work in Green Innovation Group. Is there anything you want to say here before we end this episode?
No, thanks for taking part and for sharing your sort of unique insights into our world and asking those questions. It was a great learning experience for me to try and communicate to someone who already knows and reflect in a different way.
Yeah, and as you said, all of these kind of stupid questions, that is actually just a method of being a journalist. So even though I know a lot about you guys, just ask those stupid questions and then you get to know some more. Thank you so much for making this podcast and making all of us more enlightened into the sustainable world.
You're welcome, man. Hello, and thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. It really means the world to us that you're listening in and that you're sharing the podcast as much as you're doing already. We are the top 5% most shared podcast on Spotify, and that is just a tremendous honor that you think the content is so good that you would actually share it with your network. So thanks a lot for that. Please remember that if you subscribe and rate the podcast, it makes it easier for us to get interesting people on board and have them guest the podcast and share their insights with you. So if you would please subscribe and rate the podcast, that would mean the world to us. Also, if you have feedback for us, we're always really, really happy to receive it, to listen to it, and to improve on the show and to improve your experience with the show. So thanks a lot for listening in. Have a great day out there.